Hello and welcome back to Ramblings from the Study. How are you? Do you know, I just need to share this. I just need to get this off my chest. One of the things, I'm actually a pretty laid back kind of guy. I mean, I don't really get fazed by too many things that come along. But there is a slight irritation when I'm watching the TV, for example, and there is someone on TV, obviously, because I'm watching it, and they say things like, "How are you?" Well, if I'm sitting with my leg hanging off on the settee, or whether I've won £1 million on the lottery, how will they know? I can't tell them. Well, I could tell them, but they're not going to pick up, "How are you?" So I'm not going to say, "How are you?" I'm going to change that and say, "I hope you're well and you have not gone insane yet and started to eat grass and bay at the moon." Here is a wee thing, which, I mean, it's the simple things in life, but you know, I'm exploring this new arena, this new technology. This is new to me. I've got an itchy nose. But watch this. Yeah. Did you see that? Welcome back. I'm loving it. All the so you're here today because I am a very clever man and I have some knowledge about Mark's Gospel, which I'm now going to share with you. This is I think it's day 5. So we're on day 5. Got my Bible, dusted off the pages, and today we're going to be looking. Oh, here's another thing I can do. Yeah, clever. So today we are still in chapter 1. I think we're going to be in chapter 1 until Christmas. Chapter 1, and we finished at, I think I said we'd finished at verse 7 yesterday. That was a lie. We actually finished at verse 8. So that means we're on verse 9. And looking at this, I think I'm going to stop at verse 13. So, verse 9. Do you know what I'm going to do today? Just because I'm going to read out not just a verse and then stop and then give an explanation. I'm going to read out the whole shebang. So, open your Gideons, blow the dust off. Mark chapter 1, from verse 9, and I'm going to stop at verse 13. Here we go. Not long afterwards, Jesus came from Nazareth in the province of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. As soon as Jesus came up out of the water, he saw heaven opening and the Spirit coming down on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my own dear Son. I am pleased with you." At once the Spirit made him go into the desert, where he stayed 40 days, being tempted by Satan. Wild animals were there also, but angels came and helped him. Oh my goodness. How easy is that? I mean, if you were just to read this, you haven't never really come to the Bible, and you're reading this book, like Enid Blyton, which I used to do back in the day. I'm saying back in the day quite a lot. I say kinda a lot. I say so a lot. And I go off at tangents a lot. Oh, there you are. I was over here. What was I saying? Oh, so if you were coming to this for the first time, I don't know how easy you would accept everything I've just shared with you or what you've read yourself. Because, here is a thing. Here is a thing. Lots of people in the church, not everyone obviously, but I am aware that lots of people in the church, they stop asking questions. And I'm going to put my book down, it's quite heavy. I've always asked questions. I grew up being encouraged to ask questions about everything. And sometimes that was a bit ridiculous, like, tripe and onions would be laid down in front of me as a child, and I would ask, "What's this?" Don't ask, just eat it. Eek. But some of the questions we should be asking as folks who go to the church is, well, one of the questions, what does this mean? Who is Satan and angels and voices from the clouds and being tempted? What? Yeah. What? So I think there are two reasons why Jesus got baptized. One was a decision that he made, and the other one is about identification. So let me just take one at a time. So decision. So we know that Jesus was about 30 when he began his ministry. I'll cut his age is mentioned later in the gospel, so I'll be able to say, oh, this was the age of Jesus. So for 30 years, he lived in this town, Nazareth, and he just got on with his life. His father, Joseph, now there is a controversy. His real father? His surrogate father? His father. His father, Joseph, was a carpenter. And the expectation in those days was that the son of a tradesman would normally follow the trade of the father. So again, there is a possibility that Jesus worked as some kind of carpenter, someone who built houses and repaired things. But we don't know. We just don't know. So I'll leave that to you. But anyway, for 30 years, Jesus lived in Nazareth. Now, he too must have been aware that things were happening. John the Baptist was his cousin. And again, this is a bit of an assumption, but I am convinced that Jesus was one of John's disciples. So he learned a lot from John. And he was aware that John had left his community. John had left his community and moved out to this wilderness, to the devastation, which you would have picked up yesterday, to do his ministry, to perform his ministry out in the desert. And part of his ministry was baptizing people and calling people to repentance and to start again. And part of this starting again is to show allegiance to the God which they believed in, but also to what they were doing in their community with their brothers and sisters, to help, to support them, to look out for them, to care for the needy, etc., etc., etc. So Jesus was aware of that things were happening. And I think there came a point in his life he had to make a decision that his ministry had to begin. So part of that decision was identifying with a movement. A movement was happening at the time. People were flocking to the River Jordan to say, I'm willing to start again. I want to repent. I want to have a closer relationship with God. And so therefore, part of that closer relationship with God is responsibility towards others. So Jesus made a decision. He wanted to begin his ministry. He was prepared to break away from being a disciple of John. And he identified with the movement of the people at that time. So he got baptized, even though, and I'm not really going to get into this, even though theoretically he didn't need to. But I'm going to leave that. I'll leave that with you. You can make up your own mind about it. But this is my take on it, that he had to make a decision round about the age of 30. And part of that decision was identifying with a movement. And here is the other. It's not a strange thing. I just find it a profound thing. Last night at 8 o'clock, we were encouraged to hang out our windows or stand on our doorstep and clap the National Health Service workers for doing such a fantastic job fighting this virus. And millions of people across the country did so. That's a movement. And I think people who would never think of doing that in their life wanted to be part of that movement. So even though they might have felt a bit silly and a bit awkward standing on the doorstep at 8 o'clock at night, they felt it was important to do so. They were part of a movement. Jesus saw these people flocking to the River Jordan, people who wanted to change their ways, to become closer to God, and Jesus felt it was more important to identify with them and be part of them than identifying with himself as an individual. Well, that's what I think. I don't know what you think, but that's what I think. Anyway, I'm moving on, and I'm going to talk about verse 10. Where is it? Verse 10. As soon as Jesus came up out of the water, he saw heaven opening and the Spirit coming down on him like a dove. This is symbolism. Symbolism. Now, already any fundamentalists who are tuning, no fundamentalist in their right mind would listen to me, but if there are any out there who are tuning into this, hello, welcome. I would imagine that they are now having the heebie-jeebies and think, what does he mean by symbolism? You know, a dove, a literal dove, floated down from heaven and landed on Jesus. It happened. I don't think so. I think the symbolism is that the dove was seen as a gentle force. Indeed, I've made a note. Indeed, actually. So the dove is a symbol of gentleness, peacefulness. And I think that Mark has included this symbolism in his book by saying that this man, Jesus, will conquer through love and not force. The dove being the symbol of gentleness, of peacefulness. And Jesus would take the same road, the same path. The other symbolism is verse 11. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my own dear son. I am pleased with you." Did a voice come from heaven like that literally? Nah. I can see the fundamentalists just pressing stop. Sorry. But no, a voice didn't come from heaven. It again is Mark saying in his own way that God has given his approval to this man Jesus. He has acknowledged that this man Jesus is the Messiah for the people, the Messiah with a new ministry, a Messiah who is going to conquer tyranny and injustice and corruption, not by force, but through love. So I told you I was clever. I don't make this up, you know. And moving on, I'm moving on quite quickly today. I'm actually trying to be, you know, grown up. Verse 12. At once the Spirit made him go into the desert, where he stayed 40 days, being tempted by Satan. Wild animals were there also, but angels came and helped him. let me begin here by unpacking the word temptation. And think of it not so much as temptation, but as a challenge. Now, I give an awful lot of my stuff away to you, but here is another thing that that you might not know about me. But when I was younger, I was an amazingly talented football player, and I say that in all modesty. But I was classic. I could have gone far. If I never went into the ministry, I would have retired at the age of 29, at the peak of my career, of my sporting football career, and probably have about as many fans as David Beckham. There you go. But when I was actually actively playing football, the coach that I had at the time recognised my talents, and he was the kind of guy that kept pushing me. So if I had played for the third team, it would have been a breeze. Do you know what I'm saying? I could have just strolled through it and scored a few goals, and at the end of it went home thinking, well, that was another game we won. But I wouldn't have been challenged going up to the next level where my skill was. It was harder. It was much, much harder because I really had to up my game. I needed that challenge. I needed to look at improving the skills that I had. And then if I was in the first team, probably, I'm going to be honest, probably I would not have been one of the strongest players, but probably one of the weaker players. And that would have been a real test for me. If I really wanted to remain in the first team, I had to improve. I had to face up to the fact that people were better and more skillful than me. So this temptation about Jesus going into the desert, or being led into the desert, it is a way of him facing the initial stages of his ministry. Was he up for it? Could he improve? Could he get stronger at the end of this particular period? So that's the reason he went into the It's quite interesting. It is the mention of 40 days. Do not take that literally. It wasn't an exact 40 days. 40 days is mentioned elsewhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. It simply means it was for a fairly lengthy period of time. 10 days, a fortnight, maybe even 3 weeks. But do not take it literally that Jesus was away for 40 days in the desert. He went into the desert for a period of time. Yeah, and here's the other thing which is very unusual in the language that we use today, and that is the word Satan. Satan can be translated into devil, and that word devil comes from the Greek diabolos, and quite literally it means slanderer. It means someone who is against everything that is good and bright and cheerful and joyful. It's the opposites of all the positives, if you like. I'm going to share a wee bit of Jewish history with you. The Jews, sadly, is a race of people who have always had to face troubling times. And many years before Jesus was born, their city, Jerusalem, was ransacked, destroyed countless times, not just once, countless times. And the Jewish people, the Hebrews then, as they were known, were taken away as slaves by the Persians, the Babylonians. And they learned something about Persian philosophy. There is a God of light and there is a God of darkness. And I think that part of the Jewish theology is they've taken that concept of light and darkness and used it as a way of trying to reach some understanding as to what happens in the world. Why do bad things happen? It's because of the God of darkness. Why do good things happen? It's because of the God of, joy and superiority and love. So the devil the slanderer, the diabolus, is the deity or the entity that stands up against anything that's good. So Jesus had to challenge himself by going out to the desert for a period of time and listening to his own thoughts and his own desires. And these negative thoughts, again, we're talking about a completely different time, a different civilization, a different way of looking at things. But those negative thoughts probably came from his own head, because he could easily have walked away. He could have given it a day and said, oh, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going back home. But he stayed for a period of time in the devastation, relying more on God for support rather than relying on his own means. So that's a huge sacrifice, and that is something that very few people can do. People can do it, of course. People give up material possessions and they become hermits or recluses, they become holy people. They go into themselves, they discover more about themselves. The Buddhists, that's a religion that certainly does that, and many other religions do as well. But for the majority of us, we are a bit more materialistic. We are dependent on a roof and four walls and food on our tables and money in our back pocket. And again, this is what's fascinating. Once I've started this study, if we look at today, where people are just not working and people are going to lose money, and people, I would imagine, are thinking about how they just get through the day being confined at home. I mean, last night I popped my head through the door and I took a photograph of my street. Look. See how quiet it is? That's now the norm. So after all this is over, I honestly believe that we won't take for granted the things that we have been taking for granted before this pandemic hit us. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I think you've probably had enough of me, and I will see you tomorrow for day 6, or is it day 7? It feels like day 40, but whatever day it is tomorrow, I'm going to be there. Take care. How are you feeling?